My boyfriend started asking to join me in my girls' night in. Every time I tried to say no, he'd be like, "I have to join or you'll have to cancel." It made me and the girls miserable having to sit there with him in the middle. This past Friday he insisted to join us again. I had enough. I came up with an idea to get him to hate hanging out with us. Made a plan and told the girls what we were going to do, and they were down for OT. The girls came and my boyfriend immediately sat with us and started ruining our conversations by steering them towards him / his work / his achievement. So here's what I did. I started bringing up gross / embarrassing subjects, and the girls were eating them up by talking about them in details. Subjects like sevks, periods, his most sensitive spot, cramp diarrhea, hairy legs, fart getting trapped in the vulva and coming out the front, squeezing shit out of our faces, cramp diarrhea, dirty underwear, and again, cramp diarrhea. We talked about this stuff in boring details, like, I could feel his discomfort without even looking at him. But God, when I turned to see why, he got quiet suddenly. He was getting red in the face, and had sweat all over his forehead. I bet he found himself unable to relate to this subject, thus couldn't take part in the conversation. He got up from the couch ready to head out. I looked at him and asked where he was going, and he was like, I just remembered that I have an important meeting with a guy in about 10 minutes and I have to go now. He rushed out telling us to have fun. The girls and I started laughing hysterically. He came home and berated me, saying I made him feel uncomfortable / sick with the horrible subjects I kept bringing. I said, "What you talking about? This is the typical stuff girls talk about all the time," but he insisted I made him upset and caused him to leave. He declined to speak to me and been quiet since then. This is his apartment. He tells me who is and isn't allowed to come, and I thought this was fine since it's his place. Though I help with the bills, but he makes so much more as the head of security in his company, so that's that. I just can't believe how dense and blind I've been to his negative ways. He's still giving me the silent treatment, and I've decided it's just a lot to take. And so I'm temporarily moving in with one of the girls and will now be definitely reconsidering few things. This goes back 3 years when my mom and her girlfriend got engaged. My mom put in so much time and energy into organizing this wedding and was so excited. She sent out invites to all our family members for months in advance, and almost everyone confirmed they would be going. Barely a week before the wedding, she received several messages from aunts and uncles who said they won't be going because they had other commitments, despite confirming they'd be there months prior. One of my aunts, my grandma's sister, confronted my mom and said many weren't going because they still didn't agree with the fact that she was marrying a woman, including herself, because it went against her Christian views. Meanwhile, my hardcore Christian grandma was more than happy to walk my mom down the aisle. This upset my mom, but she tried not to let it ruin her wedding. I, however, was furious. Only my grandma, my mom's sister, a few cousins, and another aunt attended the wedding, while my stepmom's entire family came. What really pissed me off was that 2 weeks later, my cousin who lives in a totally different state celebrated her sweet 16, and everyone who made excuses about not going to my mom's wedding made the journey all the way over there and posted pictures all over Facebook. It really broke my mom's heart and just felt like salt in the wound. I swore then that when I got married, everyone who did not show up to my mom's wedding would not be invited to mine. Fast forward to now, me and my girlfriend of 2 years got married first week of March, and I kept my word. The only ones we invited to our wedding was the family that did go to my mom's, and one other aunt who did have a good reason for not being there at the time because she was recovering from surgery. I wanted to clarify that I am in fact a guy. We even invited my stepmom's family too. Obviously my other family members found out and expressed their hurt over not being invited. I called them all out and said if they had a problem with my mom for being who she is, then they had a problem with me, and I wouldn't let toxic people be a part of a special day for me and my wife. My wife stood behind my decision, as did my mom. That still doesn't seem to stop them from thinking it was a move and are turning it into a whole family drama because they think it was unfair to punish them for simply believing in something different. Wow, thank you so much for all the love and support, everyone. My son Simon, he is 16, moved out of the room he used to share with his little brother and got his own room a few months back. Ever since, he's been complaining about his mom barging in without knocking and interrupting his sleep and studying. Sometimes when he's changing, I know that she's his mother, but he says he's got his own room and has a job and is learning to become an independent adult, but doesn't feel like his privacy is being respected even when that's his mom. He says he's not a kid anymore and is entitled to at least get a knock on the door before she comes in. He was getting tired of her not listening to him, so he came to me and said, "Dad, you need to help me set some clear boundaries with Mom." So I spoke to her about her need to knock before entering Simon's room. She was like, "What? And no, we're family, not strangers. Do you really expect me to foolishly knock on the door 5 times a day? That's ridiculous. Also, the knocks doors in their own home?" I told her my family, for instance. She made a face, then went on a rant about how my family hate each other's and the way they treat each other's like they were strangers is shameful. I told her family or strangers, it's about respecting one's privacy. We had an argument about it and I told her if she wasn't going to stop with the barging and refuse to knock on the door before entering, then our son will get a lock. She did it again at 11 p.m. She barged in when our son was asleep. He jumped up because he got scared. Once he told me this, I told him to go ahead and get a lock and pay for it with his own money. There was literally no other way. My wife saw it and got upset, and my brother was visiting when she was raising her voice at me if I really went ahead and got a lock for Simon despite her disapproval, and said that I caught her off guard and it's not okay. Because this teaches our children that they can manipulate one parent into doing what they want. I told her that Simon got the lock, not me, and I already warned her about the possibility of him getting a lock because he was getting tired of her boundary crossing. So she should have expected this outcome. She mentioned the same above points in her defense and said locks mean secrets, and that's not good. My brother was sitting watching while she was complaining. She began chewing him out when he asked her to let Simon keep the lock and said it wasn't a big deal. She stopped talking to me and Simon till we removed the lock, but I've no intentions on doing that. My daughter is 16 years old and in high school. I noticed recently that she's been behaving in a bad manner, constantly commenting on other people's looks, belongings, calling them stuff that isn't cool, and just being insensitive. It's like she lost a filter or something, because usually she's polite, but my wife suspected that our daughter's sudden misbehavior occurred after she started hanging out with new girls from the school. Basically the mean type, and have picked on their behavior. I've sat with my daughter and had many discussions about how her behavior has been negatively affecting everyone around her. Our housemaid is the person most affected here, and my daughter has chosen her to be her target for hair, clothes, etiquette, criticism. She has complained about our daughter calling her offensive names like filthy and gross for cleaning certain areas in our house. I took a stand and explicitly told my daughter I'd punish her if she ever said stuff like that to our housemaid again. Last week my daughter had a party to go to. Earlier that day she called our housemaid filthy. So I grounded her by not letting her go to the party. She threw a fit and called our housemaid a liar, saying she never called her that. That was the end of it. Days later my daughter came to me saying she couldn't find her iPhone after looking everywhere. She asked me to call her number and I did. My wife and I were stunned to discover that the iPhone was ringing inside our housemaid's bag. I had in confrontation with her immediately, and she denied and cried, saying she never touched the phone nor had any idea how it got there. I noticed my daughter calling her thief repeatedly, so I told her to stop and go to her room. I checked the indoor camera before continuing the argument and saw my daughter place her iPhone inside our housemaid's bag. I was livid. I apologized to the housemaid and gave her the rest of the day off. I then showed the video to my daughter and she was absolutely speechless. I said what she did was immoral and straight up offensive, to tamper with that poor woman's livelihood over a petty party she couldn't go to. I told her she was grounded and will have to spend the night in the backyard. She is a germaphobe. But she cried, begging me to not make her sleep with the dirt, insects, and hot temp. I refused to discuss it or I'd make it 2 nights. My wife said I should go easy on her, but I said calling people filthy and accusing them of stealing wasn't okay. In fact, it was the absolute worst. I then went through with my punishment. The reason I chose this punishment was because of the fact that my daughter says she is a germaphobe and used this as excuse to insult others' hygiene and appearance. Our backyard has dirt and bugs in it, and this kind of things get her uncomfortable, but other than that the backyard is 100% safe.